Our topic this morning is focusing the mind. And I like informal sessions. If anybody wants to stick up their hand and say something or ask any question, you can feel free to do it. If it's something I'm going to cover later, then I'll just tell you hold off and we'll get to it. Or if there's anything at the end, we'll have time for questions also. The choice of the title was not by accident, because focusing the mind could have been concentrating the mind. We know what I mean, but I specifically wanted to utilize some of the symbolic associations with this optical phenomenon of focus, because we use this term focus in different ways, and they're all very applicable to spiritual practice and spiritual life, because we need to have focus in spiritual life. Even this whole concept of focusing on a single point, the way the lens works in the eye, all of these things we'll find have some application in our spiritual life, our spiritual practice, and meditation in particular, but just in general. We need focus in life also, not just focusing when we sit for meditation. So I specifically wanted to use this visual metaphor for this particular function of the mind with all of its various meanings and various applications. So we'll see that we use this term, focusing, in different ways. Sometimes it's just the object of our interest. We focus on something the main focal point of our life, that we have a system of priorities, and that this is our main focus. So in spiritual life, we try to do that this is the main focus of our life. Everything else will fall under it. When we say that a spiritual goal is our main goal in life, it doesn't mean we don't have other goals in life. This is a big mistake we make sometimes. If we say God realization is the only goal of life, does that mean we can't have a good career and we can't have family and children and raise them? Doesn't mean that. What it means is that everything fits within this one goal of life, so that even the job we do, the raising a family and everything, we try to make that consistent with our spiritual goal. So we have this idea of focusing. Then we have this concept of changing our focus, that we can be looking at something, and simply by changing our focus, we see it in a different way. And I'll give one very simple example. If we look at a mirror, and generally what do we see when we look at a mirror? We see ourselves. Well, we see ourselves. We see the body. We see ourselves. Suppose we notice there's a smudge on the mirror. And we see the mirror itself. Now, if we go with this analogy of vision, what's the difference? The difference is that if the mirror is 5 feet away from us, and we're seeing our reflection, our focus is to see an image that's 10 feet away. Did you know that?
Right.
Yeah. Because the light has to travel 5 feet that way and 5 feet that way. So if we see the height of ourselves in the mirror, we'll be shorter than we really are. We'll be the same height as somebody that we saw, our height, 10 feet away. But as soon as we see this smudge in the mirror, our focus is changed so that focal point is now 5 feet away. We're looking at the same thing, same direction and everything, but we're no longer aware of our image at all. Now we're seeing the mirror. When we see our image, we're not aware of the mirror. So even this will have that application if we think of the snake and the rope and everything, that or this idea that we're seeing Brahman right now. All we have to do is change our focus. Now we see it as the world. We can see it as divine, simply through this type of change of focus. Then we also have this idea that if we can focus on something, we can get tremendous power. If we have a magnifying glass, for example, and we take it outside and we hold it just the right distance from some dry twigs or something, the rays of the light will come and they'll converge on that point and create tremendous heat. So we can start a fire that way. So focusing the mind also will give this tremendous power to us. So we have all of these things to sharpen our vision, to clarify something, all of these different meanings of bringing things into focus. Right now, we can say that we're seeing things out of focus. If we see only this physical universe, we don't see that divinity behind it. We're simply seeing it out of focus. We have to focus. We have to sharpen things and learn to see things in a slightly different way. So we can find different applications in spiritual life for all of these different visual images that we have with regard to this idea of focusing. So we want to make this spiritual ideal the main focus of our life. We want to be able to gather all of the divergent rays of the mind and focus them on a single point. When we sit for meditation and the mind is scattered all over, that means that we haven't been able to attain the state of ekagrata. Ekagrata means that it's one-pointed. And so we have all these various rays of the mind. If we can focus them through this prism of the mind so that they can converge on one single point, then we can attain to some state of deeper concentration in meditation. And then we have to learn to see things as they really are, to learn to see the world in focus. Now we see it as kind of a blur because we have all of our superpositions and our desires and our ego and our jealousies and all of the different things that cover things that we project so many things into this world, our likes and our dislikes and everything, that don't allow us to see things as they really are. From a higher metaphysical point of view, we want to change our focus so that we can see spirit rather than matter, that we can see the divinity peeping through everything and even in physical things that way. So we can understand it as simply our changing of focus. We don't have to do anything to the world. We don't have to change anything. We have to learn to see things. So this is why Swamiji used to say, don't seek God, see God. He used to say, well, where will we go to see Brahman? It's right before us. Only we don't have the eyes to see it. We don't have the focus. So this was my idea behind coming up with this kind of imagery to help us understand the need for concentration and one-pointedness and focusing in spiritual life. We'll find that some of our best sources are Swamiji himself. He speaks about this quite a bit. And teachings from the Gita. And generally, much of what we read about meditation really depends on this idea of focusing, because we say that we practice meditation, really we practice concentration. And even that, we try to practice concentration. Meditation is a very far off thing. Yeah. So what we do in meditation is we make some very, most of the time unsuccessful attempt at concentrating the mind on one single thing. What we're doing is the mind is going away, we're pulling it back. In that way we try to focus on something. So the first question I want to deal with is, why bother? What do we gain by trying to develop this faculty of focusing the mind, develop this faculty of concentration of the mind? We know, of course, if we want to practice meditation in spiritual life, it's very important, but in every field of life, even in secular life, for people who have no interest in anything spiritual, this ability to focus is a tremendous aid, no matter what it is. If we're doing some work, if we're doing some artistic things, if we're trying to be a musician, whatever we're trying to learn, that focusing the mind is something that is essential. Then, to be able to focus the mind, to be able to control the mind, means that we have some mastery over the mind. Now, of course, it sounds very contradictory, because it's the mind itself that's trying to do all of this. So somehow the higher mind gets in control of the lower mind. The mind that has no ability to concentrate is at the mercy of all of our whims and desires and whatever pops into our heads any particular moment. The external world dictates to us. We react according to circumstances, and it means we have no freedom. This is a type of bondage that we have to this reactive nature of the mind. So we read in Gita that the mind that is not controlled, it's like like a ship on the water that has no keel. You know, this keel is something that you can lower. And say if you have a sailboat, if you lower it and the wind hits the sail, then it'll go forward. If you don't have it, the wind hits the sail, it'll knock it right over. So this is what helps us keep our balance in life. If we have some anchor, something to hold on to, which means some concentration of mind, some ability to focus on something, and if we have this feeling that we're in control of our lives, then it's tremendous help for our self-image. Most of the time we feel that we're out of control, that life is dictating to us, that we're slaves to circumstances, we're slaves to our own personality, we're slaves to our desires and everything. So even if there's no question of leading a spiritual life, the ordinary person who has this ability to focus and concentrate, who has some ability to make decisions based on a clear vision of what we want to accomplish in life, gives us some feeling of that we're in control of our lives. One of the great problems in life today is people feel that they have no control, out of control. Too busy with things and too many demands on life and everything. This ability to focus on something gives us a little inner sanctuary, especially if that focusing means we understand that we're the witness, that we're uninvolved, we're detached, and all of that. So when we analyze the mind and we try to focus the mind, then we realize how difficult it is. Swamiji gives a very graphic description of the mind. He says it's like a monkey that has gotten drunk on liquor and is stung by a scorpion and is possessed by a demon. So he says that we're drunk with the wine of desire, we're stung by the scorpion of jealousy at the success of others, and possessed by the demon of pride. So this is the nature of the mind that we're trying to control. So it's a very, very difficult thing. Sometimes we think that, I haven't been able to control the mind, as if it's a simple thing. There are very few people in this world who have that ability to master the mind. Swami Vivekananda was a perfect example of somebody who, in the midst of all of his responsibilities, in the midst of all of his activities, whatever it was, how he could withdraw the mind from everything and have that perfect concentration of mind.
So we say again 3 things. Wine is what?
The wine of desire, scorpion of jealousy at the success of others, and possessed by the demon of pride. So, if the mind is in that condition, now of course we're not going to get complete mastery, but to the extent that we can, then we can have a little peace. Because this type of mind leaves us in a state of perfect restlessness. We can't have any peace of mind when the mind is in that type of condition. So this focusing of the mind and gaining control over the mind is essential in every aspect of life. When it comes to spiritual life, of course, then it has a special type of application. In Gita we read that this fickleness, unsteadiness of the mind is the main reason why we're unable to see that divinity within. If the mind is so restless, it's like we have a tropical sea area. Did anyone ever go to any of these tropical islands, Bahamas or Bermuda or something? You can go and the water is so clear. You can snorkel, and even if you don't, sometimes it's so perfectly crystal clear that you can see all the beautiful stones and things at the bottom. If the lake of our mind is muddied, And if the surface is rippled and everything, we don't see the gems at the bottom. So in spiritual life, we have to have this ability to make the mind a little bit calm and quiet. And that's what happens when we focus on a single point. Sometimes it's not even the point that's important. It's the fact that the mind isn't scattered over anything else. That's why Swamiji says that at one time I simply focused my mind on an external black point. And that was enough to keep the mind from being scattered over all other things, to get merged in that, and to enter some higher state. So we read in Gita, the unsteady has no knowledge of the self, nor has he meditation. To the unmeditative there is no peace. And how can one have peace without happiness? So just for some feeling of self-control, for some feeling of peace, we need to be able to concentrate the mind, focus the mind. But for higher realization, this is a tremendous help. Now, we shouldn't think that this is our only means of having some direct experience of the divine. This can come through grace, it can come through devotion, it can come through holy company, it can come through different means. This is probably the most difficult way. But even for devotion, if we want to sit for meditation, and we have a devotional type of meditation, we have to be able to focus the mind on mantra, focus the mind on our Ishta Devata, whatever our spiritual ideal is. So we understand that the mind is the instrument through which we function in the world. This is a very nice way of looking at it, because it means that I'm something separate from the mind. If it's an instrument, it's something that I utilize. It's not something that's going to utilize me. This is a problem. The mind controls us. We want to control the mind that way. So it's the instrument through which we function in the world. It's also the instrument through which we have higher realization. The mind is the only tool that we have. We have no other way of doing it. And Sri Ramakrishna, very often, people would say to him that, but God can't be realized through the mind. And generally we also say that, but he would correct them. He'd say, no, God cannot be realized through this ordinary mind. God can be realized through this purified mind. Otherwise, what do we have? We have nothing else. If we think that God is realized when the mind becomes perfectly blank, then will be God realized when we wake up from sleep? We'll go for a colonoscopy, we'll be out for 2 hours, we'll think that no time passed, and we'll be God-realized souls. Mind is perfectly blank for 2 hours, right? We don't know anything at that time. We're the same fools afterwards. So it doesn't mean that the mind has to become clear, the mind has to become empty, but it's still the mind. It's the mind raised to a higher level, that purified type of mind. So we have to use the mind in order to develop even devotion, to develop knowledge, all of these things. When we say mind, we mean heart also. This is sometimes a very false distinction that we make between the mind and the heart. The heart simply means that emotional side, emotional, devotional side. But even that experience of devotion has to be through the mind. The mind is the instrument that connects us to awareness. So Swamiji says, concentration of the powers of the mind is our only instrument to help us see God. The concentrated mind is a lamp that shows us every corner of the soul. Then again he says, the powers of the mind are like dissipated rays of light. When they are concentrated, they illumine. So again, this idea of focusing the different rays of the light. So, for worldly success, and whatever job that we do, we need this concentration of mind. For leading a life of contentment, where we are not constantly restless and everything, we need concentration of mind. And then, for any type of spiritual illumination. So this ability to focus the mind is essential in spiritual life. But I want to stress this other idea that we should never think that focusing the mind, it means that we'll enter into high states of samadhi and we'll have go into ecstatic moods and all of that. Because it's focusing of the mind also allows a real devotion to come. If we want to have real devotion in our lives, then that also has to be the main focus of it. The love of God has to be the main focus of our life. And that can be attained without the ability of a great yogi to sit and withdraw the mind and sit unmoving for hours on end. We don't have to attain to that. But we have to have at least some ability to sit without the mind just running all over the place. So we have to have at least this somewhat of this power of focusing the mind. What are the prerequisites for this? The first thing I think is that we have to have some understanding of what we mean by the mind. What is this mind that we talk about? We actually never see the mind. We never come into contact with the mind. There are schools of Buddhism that even deny the mind. There's no mind schools that way. We know as much about the mind as we do about matter. Swamiji says in one place that mind and matter are both metaphysical presuppositions. We never come into contact with them. We only see the surface of things. We see phenomena that way. Same thing, we never see the mind. What do we see? We see what emerges from the mind. We see the surface. We see ideas, thoughts, emotions, memories, imagination, all of these things. We see them, and we assume that these things don't come from nowhere. We assume that there has to be something underlying it, some ground for it, which we call mind. In fact, in one place he says that we assume that there's something underlying this phenomenal universe, which we call matter, something underlying this mental universe, which we call mind. If we say that one is X and the other is Y, both of them are permanent. Nothing can be permanent. It's a very high idea, very difficult. But anyhow, so we first realize that we don't know too much about the mind. We don't know how it works exactly. What's underneath the surface of it. All of the hidden things that are there, subconscious mind and all of these things. We don't know too much. We work backwards. We see what comes into the mind, and then we try to figure out what was there, which allowed those things to come into the mind. And then we get into all the Freudian things and everything else, which is helpful and also not helpful. But what we do understand is that the mind is generally very scattered. And this also takes a little bit of observation, because we don't always realize that. One example is very often when we hear that we give, say, 3/4 of the mind to God, 1/4 of the mind to the world, and we're doing something. People say, well, how can I focus and concentrate enough to do my work properly if only 1/4 of the mind is on? The actual truth is that when we think that, well, forget about thinking of God, when we think that the mind is on, not even 1/4 of the mind is on God. The mind is all over the place. So it takes a little observation. When we sit for meditation, sometimes we're shocked. The beginning of meditation, where did these ideas come from? Were these strange things, and we can't piece it together, how one thing led to another, and we sometimes wonder, is it even possible that I thought of such things? And old grudges come up, and all sorts of things. Yeah. So this mind is a very strange thing, like that. Sometimes after we sit for meditation and we think, oh, where was I? We travel to some very distant land. Thakur says in one place that we sit for meditation, part of the mind goes to Calcutta, part of it goes to Delhi, part of it goes to Kuch Bihar. Why he picked that, I don't know. Anyhow, so a little observation of the mind lets us know that most of the time we are not living in the present. We're remembering old things, or we're thinking about things of the future. And this is why this mindfulness meditation is so popular nowadays. Because people realize that, that we're not living in the present at all. So we try to focus a little bit. Either we're worrying about old things that really shouldn't matter to us anymore. Old history things that were never resolved in our minds or something. Or what are we going to do next? Are we planning? This is called Sankalpa. This tendency of the mind to spin out of control based on some faculty of association and things that through hidden desires that we would like to do or like to accomplish. Fantasizing, in a very one simple word, that way. There was a book that was written many years by this Baba Ramdas, called Be Here Now. It was a very, very popular book, based on the same idea that when we analyze the mind, we find out that we're not here and it's not now. That we're thinking of some other place, and either everything in the past or everything in the future. So we understand this, and we try to control the mind. Now, what happens when we try to control the mind? Arjuna was told by Sri Krishna to also try to control the mind, and he became very dejected. He said that you've taught me this yoga based on equanimity. To make the mind calm and smooth and quiet. And he says, but it doesn't seem the slightest bit possible because this mind is so restless. And then he says the mind is restless, turbulent, strong and unyielding. He said it would be easier to try to control the wind than to control the mind. And this is Arjuna. This is Arjuna who Sri Krishna gave him this vision of the universal form that he said no one else was ever qualified to see it but him. So he's not an ordinary person. So we shouldn't feel bad when we sit and then we say, oh, I can't concentrate. Somehow people think that everybody else has good meditation but them. I don't understand that. Right? And everybody else thinks, oh, they can concentrate their mind. I can't concentrate. Nobody can concentrate their mind. It's a question of degree. Some can do it a little better than others. Some can do it for a certain period of time. Some can do it with great devotion also. It is one of, a little bit off topic, but one of the great aids to this is something called Lila Dhyana. Because we allow the mind to roam a little bit around this divine play, whatever our spiritual attitude is. In Christianity, this is a very popular thing to think about the life of Christ and his relations with his disciples and everything. Our meditation can allow us to roam around with Sri Ramakrishna and with his conversation and with his ecstasies and sitting in his room and all of that. It lets the mind be a little bit, I won't say restless, but it gives it some room to move around. The mind reacts very strongly to somebody saying, no, you have to stay right here. It's like a little child. I don't want to stay there. I want to have fun. I want to roam around. So then they say, okay, but you have to stay inside this room. You can't leave this room. We'll leave nice toys and things for you to play with. That's Lila Dhyana. We stay within that room, but we have so many nice things to think about. That's also a way of focusing. It's not the same one-pointedness, but it's still a way of focusing, and it's wonderful for devotion. Anyhow, what does Sri Krishna say when Arjuna makes that objection, that the mind is too restless? He gives two pieces of advice. Does anybody know?
Abhyasa yoga.
Okay, why both of them? Abhyasa yoga, this we can understand. Abhyasa yoga means that keep trying. It means that you're focusing, you can focus for a few minutes, a few seconds maybe, and then the mind wanders away, then you pull it back. You try to catch it. Our problem is sometimes that we don't catch it quickly enough. And it spins out of control, and then we realize, oh, the whole meditation was gone. My 20 minutes are up, and I don't even know how it got to where it got and why it got there or anything. So, first thing is we try to catch it, and then we try to bring it back. So we try to keep it from going too far away, and we try to limit the time that it's away. So this is one way of training the mind, the way we train say a pet dog. We put it on a leash. We let it run a little bit, then we pull it back. After a while, it knows it's going to get pulled back, and it stays. But of course, the dog learns faster than we do, the mind. So this is just half of it. Then he says, Vairagya. Now why? What is this Vairagya? This Vairagya, this passion. Sometimes we say renunciation, but this passion. Now Sri Ramakrishna gives a new definition of Vairagya. his definition of Vairagya includes anuraga. Every time he talks about this passion for the world, he says, but you have to passion for God. That it's not enough. If we simply say, I don't like this, and the mind is not going to listen. We have to give the mind something else better. So this is always his prescription, that if we just say have this passion for the world, but we don't give anybody anything to replace it with. We want to replace it with something greater. If it's replaced with something greater, then there's no need for dispassion. Who won't choose something better? We're given two options. We'll always take the one that can give greater joy. So if we realize God can give greater joy than the world, then that automatically falls off. There was a wonderful statement that was made. I don't remember who made it. Maybe Swami Vivekananda, maybe many of them did. Somebody was praising him. He said, Maharaj, how great is your renunciation. He was very real tapasman, great renunciation. And he said, why? Your renunciation is far greater. It was somebody, a worldly person. He said, your renunciation is far greater. That person said, what do you mean by that? And he said, what have I given up? I've given up this little mud puddle of the world. I haven't given up anything great. What have I gotten? I've gotten the greatest treasure. I've given up a very small thing. But your renunciation is far greater. You've given up this treasure of God realization for this little mud puddle of the world. So your renunciation is far greater. You've given up a wonderful thing for a small thing. So this is, Sri Ramakrishna always emphasized this. So we have Abhyasa Yoga, Vairagya and Anuraga. If we can create within ourselves a greater desire for God realization, or for even the joy of love of God, devotion, bhakti, all of those things, then we don't have to fight so much with the worldly desires and the tendency of the mind to go outward. So this is extremely important for meditation, because what keeps the mind from being concentrated in meditation is desire.
When Sri Ramakrishna says that pray for God that reduce your activities, reduce your duties. So is that the reason for us to do, so we can have less duties and less desires and more time for thinking about God and focusing?
Not simply more time, but the mind gets drawn in that direction. Entanglements, because it's not simply activities in the world, but it's entanglements with the world. That activities bring frustrations and anxieties and more desires and all sorts of things, and ego and pride, all sorts of things come along with that. So it's partly that, and it's partly the time factor, of course, also. That we want to give ourselves more time for our spiritual practice that way. So yeah, sometimes it's not necessarily strong desires or anything that occupy the mind. Sometimes it's just our work. And Holy Mother says, don't feel too bad. If the mind goes towards your work, this is a natural thing. If it goes towards either these passions, sometimes we sit for meditation, we get angry. Right? Sometimes we sit for meditation and we remember that somebody did something or somebody said something to us. Yeah, and we get angry, and sometimes we find that we enjoy it. Yeah, some people like to feel hurt. Yeah? They are happy when they're unhappy. It's true. Human nature is a very strange thing.
I have never heard that before.
Yeah,
That's new, yeah.
that's true. Some people are only happy when they're sick, and then they feel bad and they can complain. And yeah, people are funny. So the mind, that's why I say the mind is a very strange thing that way. But if we lessen our entanglements in the world and lessen our desires, we try to lead a simple life. This is also part of Vairagya. This dispassion also means a little bit of renunciation. It means that we don't care too much for leading a very high style of life and having fancy things and having a lot of possessions and having a lot of worrying about what other people think of us. There's a name and fame and all of these things. There's a desire for honor and respect. All of these things become elements of bondage for the mind. And the mind gets too involved with these things. And then we become very sensitive. So we want to toughen up the mind a little bit, but we also want to give the mind a taste of something better. This is that anuraga. The definition of this sattvic happiness is a very beautiful definition we get in Gita. In the beginning it tastes like poison. It's an acquired taste. We may think, what kind of person are you? We're going out to the movies and the dinner and everything. You want to sit in your room and close your eyes and do nothing. Yeah, and we said, well, try it. And they said, I tried it. It didn't appeal to me very much. I said, keep trying it. And then they say, yeah, now I'm starting to feel a little bit of peace from that and everything. And then after a while I say, yeah, what a wonderful thing. So he said, in the beginning it tastes like poison, in the end like amrita, amritopamam, like nectar. So this is a very wonderful teaching we have from Sri Ramakrishna. If we only practice vairagya, it's a very negative thing. That the mind is yearning for enjoyment, and we keep telling the mind, no, you can't have it. It's going to rebel. It's like a child will. If we tell the mind, trust me, we have something even better. Try it. And we develop this love for love for spiritual practice. Sometimes we think spiritual practice is like taking medicine. It's going to cure the disease, but it's not very tasty. We have to understand, and we have to get joy out of spiritual practice. Who will keep doing it unless some joy comes from it, or at least some feeling of contentment, some feeling that this is really what I should be doing in this life. I'm not wasting this life. This is there is an ultimate golden life. So these things are very, very helpful for controlling the mind. This practice we have to put forth some self-effort. Vihasa yoga. We have to just make time, and we have to just say, I'm going to keep trying, and then cultivate this passion for the world and some type of passion for the spiritual ideal. So these three things all together will make this focusing of the mind something at least possible. Otherwise, if the world is pulling the mind constantly away, and we don't even try to do anything about it, and we don't try to replace it with anything, it would be very, very difficult. So, when we sit for meditation, we have different steps. You know, in Raja Yoga, the final 4 steps, it's called Ashtanga Yoga. There are eight limbs to it. The final 4 are what we really mean by meditation. The first is Pratyahara. Pratyahara is we have to withdraw the mind from the senses. Now, the objects of the senses have this power over the mind to draw it out. So if we see something very beautiful, then we're pulled in that direction. It's very difficult even to turn away and look at something else. If there's beautiful music or some beautiful fragrance, something like that, the mind gets pulled that way. So we have to be able to withdraw the mind. This is the first part of learning to concentrate. The Gita says, just as the tortoise, if you hit a turtle on the shell and it gets frightened, it can withdraw the head and the 4 limbs. So we have 5 things. So these are meant to indicate the 5 senses. They can withdraw it. In Thakur said you can even cut it in half. You can beat it up and it still won't go out. It will keep everything within. So we have to separate this somehow, the mind and the senses. Swamiji says, control the mind, cut off the senses. Then you are a yogi. Refuse to hear, to see, to smell, to taste. Take away the mental power from the external organs. You continually do it unconsciously, as when your mind is absorbed. Some people, they'll get so absorbed reading a book, people will walk in the room and walk out and do all sorts of things, and they won't even notice it. So we do it sometimes without even trying to do it. He says, so you can learn to do it consciously. The mind can put the senses where it pleases. Get rid of, I love this line, get rid of the fundamental superstition that we are obliged to act through the body. We are not. So even pain in the body, either we can withdraw from that so that we don't feel it, or we can be unaffected by that so that we're not miserable. We recognize the body is suffering, but I'm not suffering. We can make that type of distinction. So we start out pratyahara, then we really begin with dharana. Dharana, we're trying to focus on a single object. If we can focus long enough, if we can hold it there long enough, then we reach the state of dhyana, which is called, we translate as meditation. And this is the state where the mind is flowing towards the object of meditation, the way oil goes from, say we have a can of oil and we pour it into a big vat of oil. If you take water and pour it into a glass of water, it'll splatter. Right? But if you ever see very heavy oil, it almost seems to disappear into the oil. There won't be any splashing or anything like that. So this is the image that they give for the mind in meditation, that it flows towards its object like oil poured from one vessel into another. Or we read in the Mundaka Upanishad, if an archer is practicing and there's a target, and the bow that goes deep into the target. Sometimes it's very hard to even pull it out, that the mind can get merged in meditation that way. So this is that dharana, and if we hold it long enough, then samadhi. So this is a very interesting phenomenon where if there's a quantitative change, it leads to a qualitative change. In science, we know that, say just take temperature and water, that we start out with a block of ice. If we can warm that up to 32 degrees, and it goes above that, it turns into water. Now, the difference between 31 degrees and 33 degrees is only 2 degrees. The difference between 35 degrees and 37 degrees is only 2 degrees. But there's no qualitative change that takes place in the other. So there are tipping points. Right? There are tipping points, and also in meditation. When we get up to the boiling point of water, we know as soon as it gets a little bit hotter that it changes its nature. And then we get to the point where it vaporizes. So we have the same thing here, that this mind now is like a block of ice. Yeah? We practice a little concentration and it becomes a little fluid. It turns into water. And then we want to get to the point where it becomes very subtle and fine. And then we reach higher states of illumination. So through, just by keeping it fixed for a certain period of time, we go from dharana to dhyana, to meditation. And if we can keep that meditative state for a certain period of time, it switches. It's a paradigmatic change. And it'll enter that state of samadhi where the mind goes to a different level with different visions and things. Yeah.
Is that the idea of tapas, Swami? Is to basically increase the, I guess, equivalent of temperature?
This is a very nice way to, why did we use this expression of tapasya or tapas? Yeah, which means heat. That we can think of it that way. We can think of it also as a fire within that can consume everything. We have different images, but certainly we can use this. I don't know if this was the original intention of it, but yes. So we have to try to develop this concentration, to focus the mind on a single point. And it can be anything. For a devotional point of view, if it's something that attracts us, we have some emotional connection, of course it's better. But it can just be through this tremendous power of the mind. Look at the example of Sri Ramakrishna when he took his initiation with Totapuri. Totapuri was his sannyas guru and Vedanta guru. And Totapuri told him, now sit and close your eyes, go into a deep state of meditation where the whole mind is drawn together and no image emerges from that. It's just fully one-pointed and immersed in the self. So Sri Ramakrishna tried, and he said each time he tried, the vision of Mother Kali came. Yeah. So then Totapuri said, no, you have to even transcend that. He tried again, he couldn't do it. And then Totapuri saw that there was a little piece of broken glass on the ground, and he picked it up and he pressed it right between the eyes. right in this area, Sri Ramakrishna, and he said, focus your mind on that point. So there's nothing. It's not an image of anything. There's no emotional value to it or anything. It's the power of the mind. So Sri Ramakrishna, he said, I focused on that point. When the image of the Divine Mother came to my mind, then I took knowledge as if it were a sword, and I cut Mother Kali in half, and she disappeared, and then he went into Samadhi. Of course, it won't happen with us. but the point is that if we could attain to real one point in this, that the mind will raise to a higher level. And at least we can go from this concentration level to this meditative level. When we reach this meditative level, it becomes a little bit spontaneous. We don't have to fight so much if we reach it. Generally, if we sit for meditation for a half hour, we may get a few fleeting moments of that. If we're very, very lucky, maybe towards the end, the mind will start to flow, and we'll feel a little effortless type of meditation. But even that we shouldn't expect all the time. If we get that, we should feel very blessed any day when the mind seems to flow that way, effortlessly in meditation.
So I want to understand better. Sri Ramakrishna was all the time with mother. Why why that should not be the for him to be in Samadhi, then he's concentrating himself? Why he had
he constantly was going in and out of Samadhi, but it wasn't exactly this nirvikalpa Samadhi. That there would be some feeling of being one with the Divine Mother. Nirvikalpa Samadhi, there's not even that. It transcends everything. There's no subject-object distinction whatsoever. These are just words that we're using. Mm-hmm. What this real distinction for Sri Ramakrishna was hard to say. I always assumed that his experience of first vision of Mother Kali was nirvikalpa Samadhi. Yeah. Because he says, I was immersed in this ocean of consciousness, and lost all outer consciousness of the world, and felt wave after wave of bliss. Even that's too much for nirvikalpa Samadhi. So it's the way it's explained, Swami Atmajnanananda, the great master, is that his nirvikalpa Samadhi came with total buddhi. So even that was somehow something short of nirvikalpa Samadhi. We'll take it, right, if we can get it. We'll be happy with Savikalpa Samadhi, or bhava, ecstasy.
In some life.
In one lifetime. Mm-hmm. Now, how do we reach the stage of concentration? It's a little bit counterintuitive, but Swamiji said, let the mind run around. Let the monkey jump around. Let it get tired a little bit. Don't encourage it. Don't feed it or anything, but let it jump around. Watch it. Be the witness of it. Be detached. He says if you do that, if you try to do that, you watch the mind, then gradually you'll see that the mind will get a little bit quiet. So he says start out that way. Then he says breathe. Take a few deep breaths. Not exactly pranayama, not holding the breath. Just breathe in deeply, breathe out. This calms the mind, so that restless mind will automatically become calm. This is one of those reverse logic things. He says that when we're very excited, we see that the breath becomes uneven. If we're very emotional, something like that. So we reverse it. If we want to become calm and peaceful, then we try to make the mind, the breath, we make that very even. So this is one technique. And again, this mindfulness meditation, they also use this idea of watching the breath. Yeah. But we don't have to watch it exactly that way, but focusing on the breath also centers the mind on the heart. Because the lungs, if we're thinking that, we're not trying to think of the lungs, but somehow it focuses the mind there. So, this turns out to be one of the important elements of meditation, that a particular place in the body, sometimes it sounds very odd, the devotees will ask Ramakrishna, where should we meditate? And they don't mean, should we meditate in a temple or in our room or in a shrine or anything like that. Where should we meditate means, should we meditate on the top of the head, between the eyes, or in the heart center? So that means that part of concentration means that we concentrate the mind on a physical location within the body, at least in the beginning. So Thakur generally would say that the heart is a very wonderful place. That he recommended that mostly. He said for the real jnanis, the Shiva Yoga, that they can meditate between the eyebrows, or some will meditate at the top of the head. But he said generally the heart center is the best and safest for everyone. Now what does that mean? It means that at the beginning of our meditation, if we're meditating on the image of our Ishta Devata, we have chosen ideal that we like to think of God in a particular form. We like to think of that a God-realized soul. We can meditate on anyone. We can meditate on a loved one. M asked Thakur once, can I meditate on my mother? He said yes, because you have a great love for your mother, you see God in your mother. So if we see God within everyone, then these God-realized souls, these avatars, we meditate on them. We picture them residing within the heart. Now people get very confused, then how do I look at them? Huh? And what direction are they facing and everything? So very often people will ask, then how do we actually do it? What we have to do is we have to imagine that we're sitting face to face. Yeah, face to face, and we're seeing the face of the full of compassion and love, looking at us with great grace and everything. And we sit face to face. That means we also picture ourselves residing within the heart center. That way. And then ultimately we want to forget the body completely. But this is one way of taking one of the divergent rays of the mind and focusing it. And we'll see that this is done with our other senses as well. So we have our sense of touch, the tactile sense. It's like the mind is like an octopus. Yeah? And it has these different 8 tentacles. And there are the 5 senses, and then the buddhi and manas and chittas, so something like that. And we want to occupy each one of them. Otherwise it's going in all different directions. So all of the senses we try to direct this way. So this is the sense of, even the sense of touch, tactile sense, that we've converted to something interior and something spiritual. Then visual sense, we do that by projecting the image of the Ishta Devata. Then the sense of hearing, we don't want to hear external things. How do we combat that? We have this internal hearing through repeating the mantra. That way. So this is how we take these divergent rays of the mind and we bring them all in together. So this idea of the Ishta Devata, this ties in very much with this concept of finding an object of meditation that appeals to us and that allows us to feel some very deep love of God within the heart, love of God that has to be directed towards some type of personal image of God and have some type of relationship with God. So it allows for tremendous leeway, it allows for a certain amount of subjectivity. We talked about that last night, the importance of subjectivity. If we want to think of God as mother, we want to think of God with a particular form, we want to think of God as an avatar, we want to picture Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, dwelling within the heart. So we try to picture them. We use this faculty of vision, interior faculty of vision. So the main thing is that it should be something that elicits love within the heart. And we feel that attracts that tremendous pull, so that we look forward to meditation. This is a very important thing, that and we should feel that the object of meditation is living, is alive. We shouldn't think that meditation is simply a mechanically mental process. We should feel that there's a reality to it, that beneath the mind is the divine presence, that Brahman is there, that the indwelling presence of the Lord is there that we're coming into contact with. If it's simply an attempt to make the mind calm and quiet so that we get a little peace in life, that's the result that we'll get. It's not a waste of time, but we'll get that. Many people will say, that I've started meditating. Why do you start meditating? I feel a little peaceful and calm. Fine, it's perfect. There's no problem with that. But it's restricted to that. if we feel that meditation is allowing me to come into contact with God dwelling within the heart, then we're on the road to achieving some higher union with God. Then it becomes a tremendous thing. So, to me, this is very important that we should really feel that something real is taking place. I like to think of meditation as our chance of going to see Sri Ramakrishna or Holy Mother or whatever Krishna, whatever our meditation is like, after being away from them. So in the Vaishnava tradition, they have a very beautiful concept of Viraha Bhava and Milana Bhava, these two things. It all goes back to Radha. This is why Sri Ramakrishna, he said to Keshav and the others, you don't have to accept this Radha Krishna business. You don't have to believe that they even existed, it doesn't matter. But learn to appreciate this phenomenon there, that this tremendous longing that Radha had to see Sri Krishna, so that when she was away from him, Viraha, she was separated from him, her whole mind was on him. When will I see him again? When will I see him again? And as soon as she saw him, the whole mind was, my beloved Krishna is standing right before me. So we can also feel, just like M used to say, the second that we left, they all said it, second we left Sri Ramakrishna's room, we thought, when will I see him again? When can I go back again? So we can feel that when can we go again? When we sit for meditation? We'll sit for meditation, then we're entering into his room, entering into the heart. We have his divine presence, his divine company for 20 minutes, half hour, however long we sit. And then when we leave, then the whole mind is filled with, when will I go again? When will I see him again? So this is all a tremendous aid in meditation, because it makes it easy. Sahajya. It makes it natural type of phenomenon. It's not always fighting the mind. And we feel that we're entering into a state of reality. Swamiji says meditation is the one time in life when we are who we really are. When we can really be immersed in our own nature, when we're not so identified with all these external coverings that way. So we have this image of the chosen ideal, this Devata, and then mantra, this repetition of mantra is extremely important and very, very easy. Now, this projection of the chosen ideal and trying to visualize is next to impossible. We can do it for short periods of time, but to think that we can see in our mind's eye the way that we see with eyes open, we absolutely can't do it. But we can hear the mantra within almost the same way we would hear it if it were spoken to us. The two different faculties, this internal hearing and this internal repetition, anybody can do it. We can do it without break. But to think that we can close our eyes and visualize the picture of our chosen ideal without any break, as if we're looking at a picture on the wall, it can't be done. We're fortunate, some people are better than others, we're fortunate every once in a while. And they even say that then try to see the hands, then try to see the feet, try to look at the face, try to picture it. So, but because we're trying to do something, recreate something which is spatial, we're trying to do it in a temporal way. It's impossible. Whereas speech is temporal, one word after another, after another, after another. So that can easily be done. So this mantra, repetition of the mantra, visualization as far as we can of the chosen ideal, and this little bit of this lila dhyana, trying to feel that we're really in the presence of the Lord. All of these things are very helpful in this process of focusing the mind. So we have to also be careful about trying too hard to focus and concentration. There has to be a very good balance with all of this, because sometimes we don't want to make meditation so difficult that we don't look forward to it. They're constantly fighting the mind and everything. So Sri Ramakrishna gives a very, very beautiful illustration. He says a fisherman, when he catches a fish, The expert fisherman knows when to let the line out and let the fish run around and get a little bit tired, and then it pulls it back in. If it tries to pull it back in too soon, the line may break. If it lets it out too much, it can get off the hook. So we have to be very careful about this mind and know how much we can push it. And we don't want to reach the point where we don't look forward to meditation, where it's too difficult. So sometimes we have to even monitor the length of time we sit. If we try too much, we say, no, I'll sit for 2 hours every day, no matter what. Then we find that we dread sitting for meditation. This is also not helpful. And if we don't do enough, we don't sit long enough, we never give the mind a chance to get quiet. I sometimes find that only because I can sit for a long enough period of time that the mind gets quiet at the very end. If the mind gets quiet only at the very end, and we get up too soon, it never gets quiet. So we have to give it enough time also. So this is that meditation. Then we also have this idea of focusing, have focus in our life. And this means that all of our goals and aspirations have to be coordinated somehow with this ultimate goal of God realization. There's a goal of, if the focus of life is God realization, it doesn't mean that we don't have subordinate goals of life. The Gita gives a very beautiful image. It says that those people who have no single focus in life, that everything with them, it's like branches of a tree. They go out in all different directions. Bahushaka and Ananta. There'll be so many different things, and they'll be endless. Whereas if we have some focus in spiritual life, everything fits in nicely. Everything is done as an offering to God. Everything reminds us of God. Everything helps purify the heart. So this main focus in life is something very, very important. We see this more actually with great athletes and with great musicians. We'll see that, say, an athlete, everything that they do, say with diet, or the food that they eat, everything will be thinking about, how will this affect my ability to do whatever sport that I do. The time that they get up, or the exercise they do, everything is geared towards that one thing. Or a musician, that as soon as they get up, some of these musicians in India, I had a very nice opportunity. There was a pujas player that I met. His name was Sukhad something. If you go to the internet, just type in Sukhad and the pujas. They're fantastic. A young boy. He was 24 at the time. I would ask him how much he practices. He says, I get up at 4 in the morning and practice 4 hours every day before starting schoolwork and everything. When he was still in college that way. And these bowls. Bowl is a rhythm that they can utter. So when they practice, they don't always have the drum. They do tick tick tacky tick tick tack tick tick tick. He said he learned 10,000 of these things, and he learned these bowls before he learned to speak. Yeah. So his whole life is geared around music and everything. One-pointed, and we're scattered over everything. So a little bit of that type of focus in life is very, very helpful. The Thakur says it's like a man with a toothache. He'll do all other things, but part of the mind is always on that tooth. So we want that part of the mind always be on God that way. So if we do all of this, then we start to see things in focus. We get this other idea that now we're seeing things a little bit out of focus. Everything will sharpen up for us. And if we eliminate a lot of these passions and desires and ego and pride, all of that, then we start to see things a little bit more the way that they really are. I want to give 2 illustrations, both different experiences that I had. One a little bit embarrassing, but I remember walking into a restaurant not too long ago, and from the outside it looks like a small restaurant, and then you walk in and you say, oh, it's a big room. Yeah. So I was with some other devotees, and we're sitting at a booth, and I'm looking across, and I see a booth on the other side, just like our booth and everything. And then I move my hand, I see the person moves his hand. Then I realize there's a mirror. There's a mirror there, and they do that. You know, this interior decorators, they want your room to look bigger, put it, because what does it do? If it's a 10-foot room, because of the focus of the eye, it looks like a 20-foot room. And I'm seeing somebody 20 feet away. I'm seeing them on the other side of the mirror, and thinking that they're really there, I'm really seeing myself. Right. So as soon as I realize that there's a mirror there, I realize that it's not it's somebody else. It's my very own self that I'm seeing. Okay, just a change of focus. The other is a very embarrassing, very funny thing. This was when I first started speaking. I think I had my brahmacharya vows or something, and I started wearing this in dhoti. Yeah? For those of us who have never worn one in our lifetime, you know, to tie a dhoti and to have it look right in the right length and all of that, you know, it's a very tricky business. It's not so simple. So I'm walking from the room in Hollywood, and I don't know how many of you know the living room is there, and the living room has one wall is all glass doors and everything, and I'm walking on the other side. And I happen to look over in that direction, and I see my reflection. So I turn, I'm standing around, and I'm looking, and I'm adjusting, you know, my dhoti a little bit. And then my focus changed, and I see there are people sitting inside of the room looking at me. So this is our situation. We look within ourselves. And because the focus is on the ego, we see the self, we don't see God dwelling within. So it's just a change of focus. So these are some of the different helpful images, I think, with this idea of focusing the mind. Sometimes everything is right there in front of us. We just have to learn to see. We have to change our focus. And we'll see that divinity that we're searching for all over dwells within the heart. And we're so focused on turning within and seeing that ego and everything that we miss it. So I will stop here, and if anybody would like to ask any questions.
Swamiji,
Yes.
how we develop detachment?
This is the same thing that I was saying with Vairagya. Better to develop attachment to something higher. Then detachment will automatically fall away. Other than that, we have to focus on the transitory nature of this world. That all the things that look back at our life, the things that we were so attached to, the things that were so important to us, what happened to them? Most of them are gone. Huh? These things we cling to, that they don't last. We buy a new car. How attached we are to that new car. The first little dent, how it hurts us. We'd rather get a wound in our body than a dent in the car. Then we think that we're ready to get rid of it. You know, we don't wash it, we don't care about it. We'll get a new one, like that. So we have to. If we observe that all of these things that we're so attached to, that they last for a few days. Dudin, Thakur would say, every day lasts for 2 days. So. If we also see how this attachment, how it spoils things for us, also, that it prevents us from enjoying things, this tremendous attachment. It used to be the custom, not so much anymore, but when I was growing up in the 50s, that the people would buy new furniture, beautiful fabric and everything. They'd cover the whole thing with plastic. Yeah. So you can't even enjoy it. You don't even see it. It looks awful, but it won't get dirty or anything. It'll last a long time. But what's the point? You can't even enjoy it. Yeah.
There was a show, TV show, one of them, Archie.
Yeah. The bunkers, all in the.
He's also on
It's a
the
really
show.
soft fabric.
And we also have to understand this Vairagya. I'll tell you a secret about Vairagya. It's a very wonderful thing. If we can get a little bit of this Vairagya, it's a wonderful thing. We shouldn't think of it as a negative thing. That it's just that, well, I'm not attached to this, I'm not attached to that. Vairagya is not that. There's a burning fire of Vairagya. There's a burning fire of detachment. That we only care for the God realization. That if we can get a taste of that, and get a taste of this joy of not owning things, not possessing things, the freedom that comes from that. Swami Lokeshwaranandaji, who was the head of the Institute of Culture for so many years, who was a wonderful, wonderful Swami. I loved him very, very much. He used to quote a line from some old Christian poet. I don't remember the name of the poet. He said, "Having nothing, he hath all." It's a poem about the qualities of a pious person. Having nothing, he hath all. If we reach this point where getting rid of things gives us a great sense of freedom and joy, and we realize the less that we have, the more free that we feel. Then we understand this Vairagya is not some punishment. It's not something that you can't do this, you can't do that. That there's some very positive joy that comes from Vairagya. Vairagya eva abhayam. This is the only thing that removes fear from us. We're not attached to anything, so what can you take from me? What can I lose that will affect me? I don't own anything. I don't care for anything. I'm free. I'm beyond all of that. So it's a very wonderful thing. If we can convince ourselves, then it's not, how do we achieve it? How do we do? Well, we'll automatically run after it. Of course, not everyone can do it. We have our duties in the world. Not everyone. We can't simply, sell all our possessions and go wandering, in the Himalayas or something like that. But interiorly, we can feel that none of this belongs to me. This is our King Janaka idea. Running the whole kingdom. He said that Mithila, all of Mithila may burn down. Nothing of mine will burn down. Nothing of mine will be wrong. Everything burn. So this passion and detachment, if we get a taste for it, then we realize it is a tremendous thing. The great joy in this passion and detachment.
So Sri Ramakrishna says that if you go to Benares, you're leaving Calcutta behind.
Yes.
So we don't have to leave anything, but if we are just trying to go towards more devotion and all that.
Substituting a lower thing for a higher thing.
You don't leave anything, but things leave you. You don't have to really.
Yes. That automatically these desires drop away when we have some higher goal.
I like this way better than leaving things.
This was Thakur's way.
Yeah, Thakur's way, yeah.
Let them fall off on their own. I mentioned last night this, we get a scab. And we try to pull it off, it'll bleed and form another scab. Let it heal underneath, it'll fall off on its own. So, and sometimes we have to go through the whole game of desire and fulfillment, and then we realize that there's no end to it. This is why Kama and Artha are the two aims of life for the householder. They're also the two main obstacles, Kama Kanchan, and for God realization. And it sounds like a contradiction, but it's not, because the householder has to see through desire. It has to earn and enjoy, so that these things are left behind. I've done it. I don't need it anymore. I don't care for it. That's the whole purpose of it. Also, for the sake of society. I mean, there's some practical reasons why the householder has to, in order to raise the family and everything, have a good career and earn money and do all of that. But from a spiritual point of view, it's to see through desire. If we tell people at the very beginning that these desires will only get you in trouble, they say, let me at least enjoy something. But after enjoying and still not being fulfilled, and then realizing there has to be something higher, then they've really understood things. Yo yad ichchasi tasya tat. Whatever you desire. See, this is the Upanishad promises us that we'll get all of our desires. Now, what does that mean? It means that the desire will be finished with desires, because it's impossible to have all desires fulfilled. All desires fulfilled means that we have no desires. And it won't come through the fulfillment of desire. It'll come through the freedom from desire. So sometimes we have to experience the negative effects of attachment to learn the lesson of detachment. Swamiji says a very beautiful thing in one place. He says, nature will force you to renounce. That we have to learn our lesson. Those who are near and dear ones will lose them one day, or they'll lose us one day. It's very cruel. This is the nature of life. I always think that with a marriage, that either they don't get along and they live together for a long time, or they really love each other, and then the separation is even worse. There's the sadness that comes at the end of life when husband dies before the wife, or wife dies before the husband. So this is the nature of life. It teaches us sooner or later we have to learn this lesson. That who do we have to call our own, and to hold on to God alone. So that attachment to God will be the lesson that we get. Or attachment to the world is a very tenuous thing. If we spiritualize everything, of course that helps. We see God in everything, and we know that nothing is permanent, nothing will last, and that we're living in this world like the maidservant in the rich man's home. It helps, of course. But if we can develop this attachment to inner reality, God dwelling within, then that'll be a great safeguard for us. Otherwise, there will be so much suffering in life from the loss of our near and dear ones. Even Holy Mother, even Thakur, even Swamiji, how much they suffered at the death of their very close relatives and loved ones. And it wasn't just a show. How much the Holy Mother suffered when any of the direct disciples passed away before her. When Thakur died, of course. How Thakur grieved for his nephew Akshay. When Goodwin died, how the Swamiji was so in such a state. Somebody said to Swamiji, well, maybe it was God's will that Goodwin died. Goodwin was the one who took all of the notes for Swamiji. It was when he came to India to serve and everything. Swamiji loved him. And he said, if it was God's will that Goodwin died, then isn't it my duty and responsibility to fight and kill such a God for taking my Goodwin? So we're human beings. We'll never be free from attachment completely. And those that we love more, of course, is more painful when we lose them. But the attachment we have to our wealth and our name and fame and all of that we should realize that this is basically tuchu, a very insignificant thing. This Goshpadavadi, this is such a beautiful expression we have in our Kandana. This is a very beautiful, this is exactly that idea. Tavashri Pada, the Sampada, Tavashri Pada, that the blessed feet of the Lord, of Sri Ramakrishna. If we understand that that's the real Sampada, that's the real treasure that we have, then this bhava, this world is like the water that fills the puddle. When the cow makes the footprint in the rainy season, then in the mud, the footprint will be left there, a little water will fill it up. This world will seem like this Goshpadavadi when we have the treasure of the lotus feet of Sri Ramakrishna. It's a very beautiful line in the Kandana. Swami Atmajnanananda used to repeat this line very much. He was very, very fond of that. It was a beautiful idea. So instead of just somebody says this world is a mud puddle, they say, well, you're ridiculous. How can you say that? And then they said, compared to the treasure of God realization, then we can say, yes, we can all say it's a manifestation of the divine also, but just if we think of it just an object of enjoyment, what we can get from the world is nothing compared to what we get through some higher spiritual experience. Even through spiritual practice, we should get rid of this idea that spiritual practice is only beneficial if we get some God realization. A life of spiritual practice is a life of great contentment. and a life of great joy when we really feel that we're not wasting this lifetime. At the end of the lifetime, we all have to look back and judge how well we lived. Did we prepare ourselves for this final journey that we're going to take, or did we just think, what type of enjoyment can I have? We lead a dedicated life, an unselfish life. End of life, we can feel content. I may not have achieved much, but I led a very sincere life. I'm content with that. They're very important.
So, Swamiji, for the desire, suppose a painter, he wants to do the best painting, so when he concentrates, it's a type of tribute to the gods, so when he tries his best to take out the best out of him, and
Yes.
or the athletes.
The artist, yes, they can all do it with that feeling that it's an offering, or even say, if not an offering to God, suppose someone is an Olympic athlete,
Yes.
they're doing it for the glory of their country. At least it's not for some selfish reason. They feel that way. Yeah. If we want to do everything as an offering, then we have to be very careful that we do it with great love and concentration and skillfulness. Yeah. So we want to be successful. And not when we say we don't care about the fruits of action, it doesn't mean we don't want to be. Why will anybody do anything if they don't want to be successful? We want to be the best at what we do, because we want to do it as an offering. But once we've done it, then we let go. It's successful or not successful, it's out of my hands. I did my very best, that's all. If it gets praised, okay. If it gets criticism, okay. I don't care. I'm finished. Very hard to do.
Practice is the one, Swami Atmajnanananda told us a wonderful story. There was a man, and he had a dream when he was about to die, and the Yamaraj will come. If he's standing on his head, it means he's going to stay. I mean, he's just came to show his face, but not going to take him away.
Right,
And if he stands near his feet, it means time for him to.
right.
So that man said, okay, I will tell Yamaraj what I want. He made a kind of bed, and he started practicing circling around. I mean, he would move his body, and the Yamaraj came, and really came to his feet to take him. But the Yamaraj, he made Yamaraj to spin up so much. Yamaraj said, I give up, you stay here. So he was telling Abhyas, how much practice can, this was about practice, how can practice can make you to achieve what you want to achieve, So, very nice story. Thank you, Swami.
Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from death to immortality. Guide us through and through all over, and protect us evermore with thy compassion and faith. And peace, peace, peace.
確認できる？